In a quiet town where small minds often overlook strength, a remarkable story unfolds. Picture this: a disabled female veteran, confined to a wheelchair, lives her life quietly, unnoticed by most. Little do the local bullies know, she carries a secret, a past that forged her into a professional killer. When these bullies target her, mocking her disability with cruel intent, they awaken a dormant force within her. It's a tale of underestimated resilience and hidden abilities, with a line between prey and predator blurs unexpectedly. As tensions escalate, their confrontation becomes inevitable, setting the stage for a clash that will challenge perceptions and reveal depths unseen. Stay tuned as we uncover the layers of this extraordinary narrative, where justice takes unexpected forms and strength emerges from unexpected places. This is more than a story of revenge. It's a testament to the indomitable spirit that resides within us all. She wasn't always confined to a wheelchair. Once she was a soldier, strong, capable, and feared on the battlefield. Years ago, a mission gone wrong changed everything. An explosion left her injured, her mobility stolen, but not her will. After leaving the military, she tried to rebuild a quiet life, far from the chaos she once knew. Her neighbors saw only the chair, not the sharp mind or the skills she had honed. She didn't mind, invisibility had its perks. But then came the bullies. A group of locals, bored and mean-spirited, decided she was an easy target. At first, it was snide remarks, whispered insults meant to sting. But their cruelty escalated, knocking over her belongings, blocking her path, and laughing as though her silence was submission. What they didn't realize was that she was studying them. Every move, every weakness, staying calm while a storm brewed just beneath the surface. The bullies grew bolder, mistaking her calm demeanor for weakness. They began following her home, hurling insults, and daring each other to push their limits. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about the power they thought they had over someone they deemed vulnerable. But what they didn't see were the quiet moments when she would sit in her small apartment, her hands steady, her mind calculating. Old instincts she thought she'd left behind were beginning to resurface. One evening, as they cornered her in an empty parking lot, the leader of the group stepped forward, smirking. He leaned close, mockingly asking, "What are you gonna do about it?" She stayed silent, her expression unreadable. In that moment, she wasn't afraid, she was assessing. Every movement, every word, every escape route, it was all logged in her mind like a mission plan. Meanwhile, a neighbor who had witnessed the harassment from afar debated stepping in but hesitated. They couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. Across town, an old military contact of hers sat in a dimly lit room, staring at a photograph of her, the phone in his hand. He'd heard whispers, rumors about what she had once been capable of. And now her quiet life seemed to be unraveling in ways no one could have predicted. Just as the leader moved to grab her chair, the sound of tires screeching broke through the tension. A dark SUV rolled to a stop nearby, its headlights cutting through the shadows. The doors swung open, and two figures stepped out, their movements deliberate and confident. They weren't local law enforcement, that much was clear. Dressed in plain clothes with a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor, they radiated authority. The bullies exchanged nervous glances, their confidence wavering. The tension was at a breaking point. The bullies, emboldened by their unchecked behavior, decided to take things further. One night, they followed her deeper into the empty streets as she wheeled herself home. The leader, confident and cruel, motioned for his group to close in. They circled her like vultures, laughing and taunting, their words cutting through the cold night air. She stopped, her hands resting calmly on the wheels, and looked up at them with an expression that was almost patient. What they didn't know was that she had been preparing for this moment. For weeks, she had mapped their routines, noted their habits, and identified their weaknesses. She had spent hours in her apartment practicing, adjusting her strength, refining her control. The tools of her past, tools she thought she'd never use again, were carefully laid out, ready for the inevitable confrontation. As they stepped closer, the air grew heavy with anticipation. One of them, unsure but unwilling to back down, hesitated, glancing at the leader for reassurance. She noticed. Her sharp gaze caught every flicker of doubt, every crack in their bravado. The leader sneered, but even he seemed unsettled by her silence. And then, without a word, she moved. It wasn't fear that drove her. It was precision, years of training and survival instinct kicking in. The bullies froze, their laughter fading as they realized too late that they had underestimated her. Somewhere in the shadows, the neighbor watched in stunned silence, clutching their phone, torn between calling for help and seeing how this would unfold. The tension crackled like electricity in the air, and everyone could feel it. Something unstoppable was about to happen. Just as the leader moved to grab her chair, the sound of tires screeching broke through the tension. A dark SUV rolled to a stop nearby, its headlights cutting through the shadows. The doors swung open, and two figures stepped out, their movements deliberate and confident. They weren't local law enforcement, that much was clear. Dressed in plain clothes with a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor, they radiated authority. The bullies exchanged nervous glances, their confidence wavering. The woman in the wheelchair didn't flinch. In fact, her expression shifted slightly, almost as if she had been expecting this. One of the figures, a man with a grizzled face and a faint scar running across his cheek, spoke first. "We've been looking for you," he said, his voice low and steady. The bullies froze, unsure if the statement was directed at them or her. The tension in the air grew thicker as the man took a step closer. "Thought you'd left all this behind," he continued, his gaze locked on her. "But it seems trouble has a way of finding you, doesn't it?" The bullies, now thoroughly confused, began to back away, muttering excuses and retreating into the darkness. But before they could fully escape, the man gestured toward them. "Hold it. You're not going anywhere. Not yet." The woman remained calm, her sharp eyes darting between the man and his companion. She knew exactly who they were, old allies, perhaps, or remnants of a world she'd tried to leave behind. But why were they here now? And what did they want? As the bullies were forced to stay, the woman felt a shift in the situation. This wasn't just about them anymore. Whatever these men had come for, it was bigger than anyone in that parking lot could imagine. The man's sharp gaze swept over the group of bullies, who stood frozen under the weight of his presence. "You've picked the wrong person to mess with," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the still night. His companion, a woman with an equally commanding air, stepped forward. "You don't realize who you're dealing with, do you?" she added, her words laced with quiet authority. The leader of the bullies stammered, We didn't do anything." But his bravado had vanished. The man ignored him and turned his attention to the woman in the wheelchair. "It's time," he said. "You've stayed in the shadows long enough." She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like she might refuse. But then, with a quiet sigh, she nodded. "I told you I was done with that life," she said, her voice calm but firm. The man smirked. "You may be done, but trouble isn't done with you. And judging by tonight, it's clear you haven't lost your edge." The bullies shifted nervously, sensing the situation spiraling beyond their control. Suddenly, the woman in the wheelchair turned to them, her voice steady and commanding. "You think you're untouchable because no one's ever challenged you. But tonight, you'll learn a lesson you won't forget." Before they could respond, the unexpected happened. The woman reached into her lap, pulling out a small device. She pressed a button, and to everyone's shock, the wheelchair transformed. Hidden mechanisms unfolded, revealing a high-tech mobility system equipped with defensive features. The bullies scrambled back in fear, their arrogance shattered. But instead of attacking, she simply rolled forward, her eyes locked on the leader. "Walk away now," she said, her voice low but full of power. "And don't ever make the mistake of underestimating someone again." The bullies didn't need to be told twice. They fled into the night, leaving behind a trail of their own humiliation. As the SUV figures prepared to leave, the man turned to her one last time. "We'll be in touch," he said. "Your skills are still needed, whether you like it or not." She watched them drive away, her mind swirling with thoughts. The night had changed everything. She had reclaimed her power, but she knew this was only the beginning of something much larger. And as the quiet settled in again, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past wasn't as far behind her as she had hoped. As the sound of the SUV faded into the distance, she sat still for a moment, the night settling into silence. The parking lot was empty now, but the echoes of what had happened lingered. She glanced down at the device in her hand, her reflection staring back at her in its smooth surface. For years, she had tried to leave that part of herself behind, but tonight proved that some parts of you never truly fade. Back at her apartment, she placed the device back in its hidden compartment, her hands steady. The bullies wouldn't bother her again, that much was certain. But the visit from her old allies left her unsettled. She had fought so hard for a life of peace, but perhaps the world had other plans. As she looked out her window at the quiet street below, she allowed herself a small, knowing smile. No matter what lay ahead, she was ready.